I think that something went wrong. In the last decade, and especially, I would say, centuries, something definitely went wrong between us. Between us and between our society. The relationship that I want to point out is the relationship between ourselves, our soul, and the cities. And it's for sure that nowadays the unconscious is not inside us, but is outside us. And this is evident from looking at the ideal cities. Few centuries ago, when the world was respected and the cities were beautiful, they were not beautiful by chance. They were an harmonic relationship between the soul, the self, and the world. So the difference between architecture, identity, landscaping, object, subject was no difference. It's very strange for me that we start to reflect to these topics when something is going wrong. And we call, as humans, that situation with a Greek word, which is crisis. Crisis is the opposite that we understand today, nowadays, for this world. Crisis means a judgment. And it's always was strange to me that when we gave a judgment about ourselves, we are in trouble. But the crisis, it's also a moment where we can reflect about different harmonic situations that the past knew very well, and we forget. We forgot many dimensions that different periods past had called with different names. So it's like that we are in a situation kind of hallucinatory, that we think that there is a reality which is real, and there is, for example, another reality like unconscious which is not real. But then something happened. Then we have this situation that around us, the majority of experiences that we do are ugly. So what happened? According to Freud, the unconscious was the place of desire, of removed desire. Many of these forbidden desires became nightmares because the movement that had happened inside us made us sustain syndromes that could be neurosis, hypnosis, and many of these other illnesses. And according to James Hillman, who reviewed the theory of unconscious in a different perspective, modernity, and I would say contemporary time, it's exactly that moment of human history where all these things are not inside us, but they are outside. And then, you know, if you wanted to understand something about us, you don't have to go to the psychoanalyst or to the doctor, but just that you have to see the cities. You have to work around us. So in a completely different perspective that we had in the past. In the past, we had the opposite. So, you know, cities were beautiful, buildings were more harmonic, the relationship between us and our object were different, and so, you know, maybe the unconscious was inside. Now is the opposite. In fact, you see that in the last century, for example, all the theory about art was the theory about ugliness for the first time in history. So one good point could be to reflect about the nature of the object. Are we definitely sure that the object nowadays are just objects? Are we very safe in thinking that objects are not an extension of our world, of our interpretation? I would say more, an extension of our identity, even more, an extension of what we want to be, or even what we pretend to be, how we walk, how our car, our necklace, our garderobe, our shoes, our occhiali are everything that make what we are. So, maybe the image is not very good. Something happened and something went wrong. Think about Santa Maria del Fiore or Mantegna. Brunelleschi and Mantegna design an ideality of beauty that was exactly what they realized in their life. Not because there was no ugliness, but because there was a strict relationship between object and subject. For different reasons, this was also present in different expressions. And Caravaggio, trying to make the caducity of the human life, made an experience of beauty and the death of the beauty. It seems very real, but that is not real, because at the same time, in that vase, you have different season fruit that look very realistic, but they are not realistic at all. So something between the 16th and then 17th century, and especially in the 18th century, started to change, and the relationship that we had became more hallucinatory. And in fact, the emergence of the production of the industrial life changed the relationship between our idea of ourselves and our idea of the objects. So, we can definitely say that what happened to us is that we don't acknowledge anymore the value of things. But not acknowledging the value of things, we don't acknowledge anymore the value of ourselves. We cannot anymore give to the same concept the same words. And this is the first time that happened in our long history of ideas. Plotinus said that there is no beauty. The only beauty, the objective beauty, is a perspective, an attitude, an approach. How you look at things, then this is how things are. The physics in the last decades demonstrate that this is exactly the perspective, the perfect perspective. How you make an experiment, put an hypothesis over the experiment. So, the reality is not objective, but the reality is how you imagine and want to realize. For that reason, architecture is very important. We are in Venice today, and Venice is the perfect example of a city which is not built for the people who want to build these incredible palaces, but for the people who were not the owner of the palaces. So the search for beauty is not the search for luxury, is not the search for lusso, but is the search for a moral tension, to elevate spiritually the human beings, starting from the owner who wants to have the objects. So if we want to give a definition of our contemporaneity, of our age is a place where the relationship between the value of word and the object and subject is gone. I think there is an important book that can be read in a different way and can explain very well this missing point. Is the gospel. Aside of being a religious book, the gospel tells about a world where the economic relations were safe. In the desert, Christ doesn't want to transform stones in bread, which was possible being the Son of God, because he's not looking for material things, but is looking for spiritual things. And what is the most spiritual things in all the religion? The contemplation of beauty. The new relationship between object and subject, where the object and subject are the same, in a fusion. This is the experience of love that everybody hoping in life experiment. Where you are in love, you are experimenting this fusion, which is at the base, according to the physics, to the last research of the physics and not just to the religion, which is the base of our universe. So, this idea that you have a bed today, which is not a bed, which is the function of bed, it's completely hallucinatory. All the substance of reality is made and it's based about ideas, which is spiritual. You can call this in many names, but it's also the same thing, this moral tension to transform reality in a place where you can live well. For this reason, aesthetics and the aesthetics perception and the aesthetics experience and journey is very important. This is very important point for architecture. Why architecture is so central and why design is so central in our society? Because the experience of beauty comes more before and after the experience of the function. This is why now in Davos, in the last Davos, the title was The Architectural Society. So in the 90s, finance was very central in our society, but now and more in the future, you will have an experience completely different. You will have an experience where the relationship between space and subjects and objects will start to change, hopefully, in a way where you have this fusion. For that reason, the aesthetic response is very important, and it's our mission to the future. The value of things. The value of things is very important. The value of things, it's, for example, Andy Warhol Campbell soup. Andy Warhol Campbell soup want to say, look what you are doing every day. Look with what you are dealing every day. This is your life, a life where you have this kind of paradigm outside, this kind of neighborhood outside. So, in this kind of world, there was face. For example, this one. This is the Italian embassy in Brasilia. And the Italian embassy in Brasilia, made by Pierluigi Nervi, which was a kind of poet of cement. It was really and directly, maybe for the last time, to the long tradition of the painting. In this case, Giovanni Fattori. Whereas secret harmonies that we lost, and that are very important in a world where all the desire became liquid. And we are not surprised that you have this kind of experience in life. This is not just the inner cities, but are the experience that we make in different kind of relationship with the world. Because the difference between landscaping, design, architecture is a fake and scholastic distinction. Because everything is related from the perspective. From a very long distance, you have to do with landscaping. When you approach, landscaping becomes architecture, and then you are dealing between architecture. Or if you want, between urbanistics, the city, the shape of the city and the shape of the villages. And then approaching, you see buildings, object, big scale. And then approaching more, you have a small object. And that could be also called design. So, this is always a relationship between the object and the subject, but at some point the Chirico, no? And il Palazzo degli Italiani della civiltà fascista, to stay in Italy. No? This is maybe the last moment in which a spiritual tension, aside any kind of communication and judgment, was possible to understand a new dimension of man that after was completely destroyed, completely lost. You know, for example, in Scampia, le vele are an incredible architecture, an incredible interpretation, but it was an interpretation of another dimension of humans, and Giuseppe Terragni and Ottone Rosai. So, you know, all this experience represent a changing world where this relationship are transforming after having been lost.